Are you ready to listen to a forgotten legend, drifting softly through the sands of time? Once upon a time, there was an ancient city bathed in the golden hues of the sun, a place where even the sky bowed in reverence to touch the earth. This city, whose stones were woven with faith and whose winds whispered myths, was named Jerusalem. But in this tale, there are no fire-breathing dragons, nor are there magic wands. This is the story of a brilliantly radiant soul, one whose light would make the sun itself envious trapped inside a decaying body, and how it waged a relentless war against a merciless fate. Dim the lights, and let your mind surrender to the warm desert winds. Behold the most sorrowful and magnificent epic in history, the tale of the silver-masked king. In the cool, white marble palaces of Jerusalem lived a child. With hair spun from sunlight and eyes stolen from the clearest blue of the heavens, his name was Baldwin. He was not an ordinary prince, destined to live out his days in silk garments and joyful songs. When destiny wrote his name beneath the stars, it placed upon his shoulders both the heaviest crown and the cruelest curse in the world. At merely 9 years old, while laughing and playing in the gardens, his fate was sealed the moment he felt no pain from a dagger that pierced his arm. The diagnosis was the darkest, most unspoken death sentence of the age: leprosy. Before it could even see its spring, his body began to wither and fall away like autumn leaves. That beautiful face slowly began to fade. So that his people would not fear him, and so that no enemy could see the frailty of his young soul, they placed a cold, enchanted-looking silver mask over his face. Behind that mask was no longer a mortal. He became a ghost prince who rolled the dice with death every single day, his soul taking deeper roots in the heavens as his body rotted away. As time wove on, far beyond the walls of Jerusalem, a dark desert storm awakened in the east. This was no ordinary wind. It was Saladin, the lord of the wind, the sand, and the steel. The invincible lion of the Orient had set out to swallow Jerusalem with colossal armies that blotted out the horizon. When the news slipped through the palace windows like a dark raven, Baldwin was confined to his bed. Consumed by fever, struggling simply to breathe, he was a 16-year-old boy whose right hand had grown too numb to even hold a sword. As the palace viziers whispered of surrender, the gloomy silence of the room was shattered by an icy voice echoing from behind the silver mask. "Bring me my armor." Weeping, the servants dressed his melting body in silver armor. It was impossible for him to mount a horse, let alone stay in the saddle. "Bind me to my horse," commanded the young king. The soldiers strapped their king tightly to the saddle with heavy leather belts. They took his numb, lifeless hand and sewed it to a heavy, cold knight's sword using blood-soaked linens. Baldwin, who had entered that room as a boy waiting for death, rode out of it as an epic hero defying the wind itself. The heavy gates of Jerusalem slowly creaked open. There was no massive army covering the horizon behind Baldwin. There was only a handful of knights who believed in their king unto death, armed with the faith they carried in their hearts. On the burning sands of Montgisard, they stood face to face with that colossal desert storm that darkened the sky. Saladin's soldiers, intoxicated with the promise of victory, smiled when they saw this tiny force and the silver-masked boy strapped to his saddle. But the heavens had not yet spoken their final word. Baldwin turned to his men. From the eyes behind his mask flowed not tears, but pure, radiant light. He was gently lowered from his horse. Beneath the crushing weight of his armor, he fell to his knees on his decaying legs in the middle of the scorching sands, right before the true cross. He buried his face in the sand and waited in utter silence for minutes. In that moment, the wind ceased to blow, and time stood still. Both armies held their breath, watching this wounded heart pray for a miracle upon the dunes. And then, the young king slowly rose to his feet. In the eyes of his army, he was no longer a leprous, wounded boy. He was a silver-winged angel, descended from the sky. With his hand sewn to his sword and his face turned to the sun, he roared, "Forward!" Like a blinding beam of light, the handful of riders hurled themselves into the heart of the shadows, right into the absolute center of the massive army. The moment of impact echoed, Like a thunderstorm tearing through the heavens, Baldwin fought not like a warrior, but like a soaring phoenix. He glided over his horse like the wind, cleaving the darkness with the sword sewn to his flesh. A supernatural terror gripped the hearts of the enemy soldiers as they watched that silver mask gleam under the sun. Swords sang against shields, and the sands slowly turned crimson. Without blinking an eye, Baldwin dove into the darkest circle, embracing the chaos as if welcoming an old friend. He was not afraid to die, for he had been sleeping side by side with death for years. Faced with this epic, unfathomable courage, the invincible colossal army first fell into confusion and then began to shatter and scatter in waves. Saladin, the lion of the desert, experienced the greatest shock of his life against this fairy tale will, forced to retreat behind the dunes with the broken remnants of his forces. As the sun set, a deep, magical silence draped over the desert. Baldwin had succeeded that day. Through the sheer iron will in his heart, he turned a miracle rarely seen even in fairy tales into reality. But the end of this tale concludes, not with eternal happiness, but with a sorrowful, majestic peace. When the war ended, that exhausted and decaying body had finally reached its ultimate limits. Over the years, leprosy stole the light from his eyes, condemning him to darkness. Yet, even when he was completely blind, Baldwin remained strapped to his saddle, continuing to be a beacon of hope for his people. This unfathomable soul inspired such profound respect, even in the heart of his greatest enemy, Saladin, that an epic, unspoken bond formed between the two rivals. When the young king closed his weary eyes to this world forever at the age of 24, his body had long been claimed by the earth, but his soul blended into the stars. Death never truly defeated him on the battlefield. It merely took him gently by the hand when the time was right, guiding him into the heavens. They say that even today, whenever the wind blows sweetly across the deserts of Jerusalem, you can hear the whisper of a young king gliding through the sands with his silver mask and sewn sword. It matters not how heavy a cursed destiny has laid upon you. What matters is how you forge that curse into a legend.